we never speak to our own money. So that's what is the main objective behind everything. The money is an important part of our life. Therapan Samaj being spiritual, people are loving to be into more of spirituality, as well as people look for day-to-day needs of their earnings. And this is the event we'll call Let's Talk Money. Today, on this occasion, I would like to just request the most dynamic and the person who speaks himself as the leader and gives a lot of inspiration to all of us. I would like our president, Lakshmipati Malu, to give his welcome speech.
Thank you, Hitesh ji. I will start with गुरुदेव महाश्रमण जी के श्री चरणों में कोटिश वंदन. टीपीएफ के आध्यात्मिक पर्यवेक्षक मुनि श्री रजनीश मुनि जी के चरणों में वंदन. और बेंगलोर में विराजित सारे चरित्र आत्माओं को कोटिश वंदन. First of all, I welcome all the participants from across multiple cities for today's very special event, Let's Talk Money. And we are truly honored and privileged from a TPS Bangalore perspective that we are able to host Monica ji today in this event. And also I also want to recognize that today we also have dignitaries and luminaries from our national leadership and zonal leadership. So I will call out few names. I might miss some of them, so it's not intentional. So first of all, our national leader, our national president, Sri Navinji Parekh, I welcome him. Then our national Mahamantri or General Secretary, Himat Ji Jain. Then national past president, Sri Nirmal Ji Kotecha, Sanjay Ji Dhariwal, and from national team, Nirmal Ji Sancheti. And from our zonal leadership, South Zone leadership, Sri Dinesh Ji Dhoka and Sri Mahinder Ji Dak. It's an honor to listen and learn from Monica Ji Helen. And for me personally, for me having a fanboy moment, I have been following her since many years and read her books. Very, very insightful and very, very simple in language. The most important part in Monica Ji's narration is very simplistic way of putting things instead of very complicated stuff what we tend to learn and listen on television. So I hope everybody would have a super exciting session. And as Hitesh ji told, please hold your questions in the last part of the session. We'll have questions asked by Monica ji, and then we'll have answers. So again, welcome you all, and thanks for attending this event today. Back to you, Hitesh ji.
Thanks for the insightful speech, President sir. Your speech always inspires everyone over here, and we look forward as a dynamic leader what we have, and that's the moment where we take our step ahead to create many of this kind of events for you guys. So coming to, of course, we have heard from one of the leader of Bangalore branch, but we need to understand ये एक सौभाग्य की बात है कि हमारे बीच एक बहुत ही senior most और बोल दे या फिर हम लोग बोल दे कि a leader who makes himself in a pathway and makes again inspires everyone in every moment of his journey of his life now, and we have our own national president Shri Navinji Parekh with us. We would like to hear from Navinji Parekh sir. So over to you sir.
Thank you Hitesh ji for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you all. सबसे पहले गुरुदेव के चरणों में वंदना, आध्यात्मिक पर्यवेक्षक मुनि श्री रजनीश कुमार जी के चरणों में वंदना, मेरे सीनियर्स, मेरे टीपीएफ नेशनल के पास्ट प्रेसिडेंट्स, my colleagues in TPF, and most importantly the speaker for the day, Monica ji. Good morning. Having given an opportunity to speak and share my thoughts, I was really excited. TPF having more than 63 branches across the country. They have so many programs, but when I got the flyer of this particular program, I requested Lakshmipati that I would like to register for that and I want to participate because I have heard Monica ji earlier also. The best part of her deliberation is the way she explains. It's so simple, so easy, especially for people who feels that money market, monetary planning is so complicated. But I'm sure whoever are participating today, upon the end of the session, will get to simplify and declutter our mind. That's what I have taken back from the last session which I attended of Monica ji. In the monetary market and especially in this arena, where we get to see so many faces over television when they tell us where to invest, how to invest, what to invest, and how much to invest. Here we have very few female leaders or female guide who can guide us. And out of those few, I think Monica ji is one of the most prominent ones we have in our country. Creating resources, generating resources, earning resources, we all are into as professional or as businessmen, whoever are listening to her. But the optimum utilization of resources is something which is very much required. How do we use what we have? And I think that is the lesson which we are going to listen from Monica ji today. And the topic itself is so simple, so easy, and so catchy. Let's talk money. Let's declutter it. And again, I am sure that people are more eager to listen to her. And I welcome her again on behalf of the entire Terapan Professional Forum on this program under the banner of TPF. I congratulate TPF TPF Bangalore under the dynamic leadership of Lakshmipad ji for organizing such a beautiful program. And there's one thing which connects me to Monica ji. We both are students of economics from Delhi University. So I'm glad to hear you. We are alumni from the same university. Welcome, Monica ji.
Thank you, National President Sir, Naveen ji sir. Of course, yes. जब सेम कॉलेज से या फिर सेम यूनिवर्सिटी से दो जन मिलते हैं तो दिस बिकम्स अ मोर ग्रेट मोमेंटम फॉर अस टू अंडरस्टैंड एंड द स्माइल ऑटोमेटिकली स्पीक्स फॉर एवरीवन कि हाउ दिस कनेक्ट बिल्ड्स अप इन अ बिगर वे. सो on this occasion we have our dynamic leader from Bangalore as well as creating vibes across India, our own past president as well as, I can say not past president, immediate past president as well as a national secretary, Himmat ji with us. So let's hear from our national secretary, Himmat ji sir.
Thank you, Hitesh ji, for this opportunity. आचार्य श्री के चरणों में वंदन. TPF के स्पिरिचुअल गाइड मुनि श्री रजनीश मुनि के चरणों में वंदन. Speaker of the day, Monica ji, TPF national, all national leaders, zonal leaders, and TPF all members and participants of the day. Sadar Jai Jinendra. I have been, I would say, privileged or lucky enough to come across many articles of Monica ji on Mint. I'm a regular reader of the newspaper Mint, and also blessed to go through some of the TED Talks given by Monica ji. And I would say she's always bang on. And when it comes to investments, savings, spending, liquidity, I would say she's kind of a crusader. She wants to, spread the goodness of the investment philosophy across the world. And as a NGO, TPF, we must spread her voice as far as possible. I think today is one start which we are doing. And I'm really thankful to Lakshmipad ji, Hitesh ji to have it here today. And Lakshmipad ji specifically, I've been, Monica ji, आपका नाम इनके मुंह से बहुत बार मैंने सुना है. And I know how Lakshmipad ji has multiplied his wealth and how he has been disciplined in terms of his investments, savings and spending, and other parts of the investments. So really nice to have you here, and looking forward to learn from you more today, Monica ji. Thank you. Thank you, Bangalore, TPF Bangalore.
Thank you, Himmat ji, for a great insight again. So most of them are very much familiar with Monica ji, but still many of them are still not much familiar to hear from Monica ji today. Of course, before that, we'll have a word from our, again, senior most member as well as a past president, Shri Nirmalji Sancheti sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hitesh ji, for giving me this opportunity. अनंत आस्था के केंद्र आचार्य श्री महाश्रमण जी को कोटि से नमन और हमारे आध्यात्मिक पर्यवेक्षक मुनि श्री रजनीश कुमार जी को नमन. Speaker of the day, national team, zonal team, and all other participants, Sadar Jai Jinendra. It is my immense pleasure to introduce this dynamic personality on the event Let's Talk Money. It's a very interesting event organized by TPF Bangalore. And just to share a little bit about the speaker, this great person is student of economics, completed, as Naveen said, Master of Economics from Delhi School of Economics, and did a second master's in journalism studies from College of Cardiff University, Wales, UK. And this versatile personality has public policy experience, working with the Government of India as an advisor in Swarup Committee in 2009. Was also a member on the Ministry of Finance Committee on Incentives, which is the BOSS Committee, and has been a member on the SEBI Mutual Fund Committee since 2010. She was a member of the task force set up by Government of India to put in place the Financial Redressal Agency. She has worked across various media organizations in India, including Economic Times, Indian Express, and was editor of Outlook Money. She has run 4 successful TV series around personal finance in NDTV, GE, Bloomberg, Bloomberg India. She is also authored a book published by Macmillan, which is 7 Steps to Financial Freedom, and that was in year 2005. She's based in Delhi, and she was chosen as a Yale World Fellow in 2011. She also published one of the best-selling books by HarperCollins, Let's Talk Money. That was in July 2018. She's a well-known media personality, and she's a consulting editor with Mint, India's second largest business daily, that is. She's a regular speaker on financial literacy, regulation, inclusion, and consumer issues in retail finance. And she's also an adjunct faculty professor at Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. She's a think tank of Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, with a chant of Om Arham, I feel great honor to introduce to you a multi-talented bundle of knowledge, vivacious Mrs. Monica Hull. Let's all welcome her and to Monica ji for being the speaker today.
Om Aram.
Om Aram. Om Aram.
Thank you very much, Nirmal ji, for that great introduction of our speaker for the day. It was an idea about Glimpse gives in such a big excitement. Of course, all the participants might be also excited to hear from this versatile personality, the dynamic lady. Of course, when you have on a Sunday morning lady speaking, the registration automatically boosted up yesterday when I just put the flyers everywhere. And from 74 registrations, it came to around 150 registrations till morning today. So great momentum, ma'am, for today. And without any further ado, I would like to just hand over the Zoom platform and the spotlight to Monica, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. And request all the participants, one small information to you guys. So please put your names, change your names with the branch or whichever the place for you're belonging from, so that we can know how many people, which place they are coming from. And without any further ado, I just hand over the floor to Monica, ma'am. Request all the participants to keep them on the mute mode.
Thank you very much, Hitesh ji, Lakshmipat ji, for this very kind invite. I hope I'm audible. Just give me, okay. So very kind words have been said about what I have done and the work that I have done. But I think there are two things that I want to say. One is that I think what we have lacked in India has been the Indian cultural connect. So you have books which are very popular and they sell in millions, but there the author is talking down his own biological father. And we all know what book I'm talking about. And he's talking up a friend's father who was the smart father, and his own father was the non-smart father. Now, I mean, this will work very well in a different cultural context. But I don't think the Indian cultural context at all would be conducive to such a philosophy or ideology. So I think for me, money is far more than just what it can buy and how you can earn more and how you can multiply it. I think the way that you earn money and how your attitudes towards it really have a very deep cultural context. And that I feel is one of the subtle things which possibly come through when I either write my book or do my talks, that we cannot disassociate who we are as Indians and as a community like the Theravada community is. You can't disassociate your basic value system and cultural upbringings from money. And if you tend to integrate the two, the disharmony disappears. Which brings me to my second point, that in all of my conversations, in all of the communications in the book that I have written, I do not promise to get you rich next year or the year after that. It is more about having control of your money, building a system which gives you the ability to withstand pressures as they come in your life and to build financial fitness in your lives. So what I advocate is a system, it's a money habit rather than a few tips to get you rich quickly. The tipsters are many, and I'm sure everybody has experimented in that tip which will grow your money, and the chances of it doing well are 50-50, we don't know. But what really gives at least me security is the fact that I have a system in place. I don't have to watch the market every day. A new deal in real estate coming up where the airport is coming doesn't excite me. So somewhere my orientation towards balance in my life resonates with the balance I have in my money, right? So I think that is really important, that your relationship with money has to resonate with your relationship with yourself and the rest of the world in a very deep way. So with these few words, I'm going to share my screen, and I would request everybody to please mute yourself through the conversation, and we'll have time for question answers after that. Is the screen audible, Hitesh? Okay. So essentially, in the context that I have talked about money, I want to go back a little bit and say that, as Indians, we've had a very difficult relationship with money. And it's been a desperately poor country for centuries. There was invasions, there was colonization, and the wealth has got drawn away. We used to be a very, very rich country. And then it was generation after generation of plundering and poverty, with no prospect really ever of getting out of it till very recently. And imagine the mind state of people when you see that there is no prospect for growth. Then you take the moral high ground and say, wealth is not important. You say that only the bad people get rich, only the evil people, only the corrupt people get rich. It's a very poor country response. It's a defeatist response, and there's no moral judgment. I mean, that is what the time was. And our ancestors all dealt with it in the best way they could by saying that, oh, if I can't have something, let us not even want it. So we pushed the Lakshmi, we pushed the wealth away. And for me, nothing demonstrates our relationship with money better than Bollywood. We had just got independent. It was a largely agrarian, rural country. And this Mother India movie with this evil moneylender who's preying upon the life, blood, honor of the poor people was so beautifully depicted, at least in this one still for me, where all that was wrong with India was depicted in this one still, where the rich is evil. He's fed upon the blood of the poor. And there is really helplessness in every situation. But then you start moving and you go to the 70s. And now the bad guy, the rich guy is still the bad guy, but he's now a smuggler. So he's smuggling gold. It used to be charas and all in the 70s movies. The good guy is a poor policeman, the brother. And this seminal dialogue that he has, the rich guy has Gadi, Bangla, Daulat, Shohrat. The poor guy has Ma. So this dichotomy about being morally high but poor, because he has also the mother and therefore her blessings. So Diwar again was that 70s iconic movie which told us our relationship with money. Then moved to the 80s, we've begun to change. There are companies coming in. Kala Patthar was the evil man, now is the corporate. It's the guy who's again, his profits is all that matters. Life of people doesn't matter. But the poor guy is beginning to change. He's far more aware of his rights. He's far more aware of what rebellion can be and how to fight for those rights. And remember, this movie also came in the backdrop of the whole coal mine nationalization, bank, airline nationalization of the 70s, when Indira Gandhi turned India to a socialist nation. We got the words socialist and secular introduced into a preamble in the late 70s by Indira Gandhi. So we took a turn towards distributing poverty at that time in the late 70s. And this movie was, again, showing how it is. Then 91 happened. And I think a lot of the people on this group would have benefited in many ways. I mean, I know that 91 October was my first job as a trainee researcher in Business Today. And, you know, this cohort which joined the workforce around that time, we didn't have to be extra intelligent. We didn't have to be extra smart. We just had to have a basic education from a good university, speak English well, and just work hard and honestly, and we would do well. And I think there has been millions of people like this. The boats have all got lifted because of that 91 liberalization, which really happened because IMF and World Bank put a gun against our head and said, you will default on your obligations if you don't change your regressive, repressive socialist rules of the 70s. And then it took 10 years for then now, again, this seminal movie in terms of the relationship of the protagonists with wealth. Wealth is a backdrop. And you don't have to be evil to be wealthy, but it was part of the conversation. It wasn't really something that you discussed. There was a change in the way the cinema looked at women. The female lead is shown drinking wine, going out, but she's neither a prostitute nor a bad girl. So the whole social conversations around how we look at women also began to change. So money stopped being bad around the 2000. It became something to aspire for. Bill Gates became a name a lot of children knew because that he sort of epitomized wealth. And then comes this movie a couple of years back called Gully Boy. He was a slum boy. He wants to make it big. He doesn't want to make it big because of a ailing mother or a marriageable aged sister, or he wants to make it big. He wants to be rich for himself, and he knows that he has the ability to do it. He's going to break out of this ghetto that he's in and make it. So Gully Boy became this sort of lightning rod for the emotions of the aspiring India, which we are seeing the results of that aspiring India taking the country in a certain direction. And Gully Boy really was that movie which did that. So our relationship with money has changed from something evil, something unreachable. It's now within the reach of many, many, many more people than ever before. India has lifted 300 million out of poverty in the last 15 years. That 300 million people who are desperately poor are now doing much better. So the poor have become lower middle class has moved up. So there is a whole different way that we look at our money. But we are still, the way that we manage our money, the way we think about money is still very 1970s. We're still overly focused on safety, on gold, on real estate, things that we can hold, things that we think will give us security and stability. So we need to look at our fixation for some of the way that we've managed money because of lack of options and lack of security. So whatever we could control and hold, we would do that. So the way that we want to manage our money is the second conversation. The first conversation is we need to understand the Dhan Chakra, the role of money in our life. Because our education, the entire system doesn't prepare us to deal with money when we start earning. Your entire conversation as a child, as you're growing, is really about padho, likho, kuch bano. What does kuch bano mean? It just means that you should earn well, you should have a good life, you should be wealthy. But nowhere does it put in context this whole circle of wealth from the time that you earn, and then you earn far more than you need, and then the part of life where you don't earn anymore. You are living off that. And in that journey, you have various financial goals. So we don't have the money conversation with our family. We don't allow our children or our spouses to participate in the money conversation. So it's either because of fear or insecurity, or simply your own ability not to be able to deal with it. But families where I've seen where children are really a part of the money conversation, where choices are laid on the dining table to say, we can have this holiday, or I can save so much for your education. So the it's interesting for the children themselves to make those calls to say, well, okay, I will forego this holiday and I would rather spend that much on my degree in the US or UK. So it's interesting to start talking to children in a certain way about money. But let's understand this dhan chakra. So when we are, so also remember, we have to see ourselves as a factor of production. We may be CEO, we may be president, we may be whoever, but finally, when we look at land, labor, capital, we are labor, the factor of production. And because of the work that we do, we generate a return. That return, when we are earning, is either salary or profit because of the business that we have set up. But yeah, our income boxes, imagine there's a box in which income drops in every month or every quarter or whenever. Initially it's salary income which is filling, and your investment incomes out of the money that you have put to work is very, very little. Out of this income, you are paying monthly costs, taxes, EMI. And then very simple ratio, income minus expenses is savings. Savings being a target or a residue is something which is a decision that each person takes. In the system that I give, I don't tell you what to do. The choice is yours, therefore the responsibility is yours. So it's very easy for gurus on money to say, if you do this, you'll be fine. I'm saying, no, that's not the Indian way. The Indian way is always argumentative. It's always discursive. It's always saying, responsibility is yours. Here is how it works. So savings is either a target or a residue. Now you have to decide which one of these it is. And we'll come to some ratios later. And savings is not enough. So India has a very high savings ratio. Right now, I think last month it was 24% of the GDP. America, remember, has a negative savings ratio. They consume more than they earn. But the key is to turn this savings into investments, because savings is just cash. You need your money to work hard. You're working extremely hard. Your money should work hard as well. And how do you turn savings into investments? There are three essential ways. So you can have lots of people talking about different products. This is a ULIP, this is a derivative, this is a Bitcoin, this is this. Essentially, you have three ways in which your savings becomes investment. Either debt, which is your fixed deposit, PPF, bonds, government bonds, anything with a fixed return is called a debt allocation. So when we think of debt, we think of a loan that we take, but this is really the loan that the company takes. Even when you put money in a bank as a deposit, it's a liability on the bank. It's your asset, but liability of the bank. So debt as an asset class is anything which gives you a secure return. When we get into mutual fund debts and all, we'll understand why it's not secure. It's not guaranteed like a government bond or a PPF is, but that's the asset class, fixed return. Then you have the equity, which is the stock market. We will talk about the stock market in a while. And then you have real assets, which is gold and real estate. So debt will give you interest. It may give you capital gain when bond prices go up and down. Equity is dividend and profit. Real estate is rent and profit. Gold throws off no rent, interest, dividend, but just gives you profit. So different asset classes will have different attributes. And ideally you have to match your own requirement with these asset classes and not just go and buy the product that they're selling. So the way that the market is structured is they will sell you the product that they're manufacturing. We'll just turn it around into saying, what is it that I need? And then I decide on what I will buy. By the time you come towards your retirement, whether it is out of choice or you are laid off finally, or you want to work and your body is not able to, for people in their 30s and even early 40s, you think 20s, 30s, you typically don't think you will get old. But I think you should just look at the faces of your father and grandfather, mother, grandmother, and know that there have been thousands and millions of human cycles before you. It's nothing unusual that you're going through of birth, adolescence, youth. There is a cycle. You will also be part of that. There is nothing anybody can do to kick that cycle. So when you're younger, you do feel extremely powerful with your physical energy, and that's a great thing. But every time you think that old age is not something which will happen to me, or that it is very old, just chat for 5 minutes with your father or grandfather and figure out how quickly it comes. And the one regret that most people in their 70s and 80s, well, 60s and 60s have, is that they didn't spend that extra little time in terms of thinking through their money so that they could have a little more money in their retirement. And your generation of the cohort in your 20s, because of medical advancements, you are going to be living till 100. You may have more life left than money. So take this conversation seriously, because it's very, very small steps which get you prepared. This is what I call Dhan Chakra, that you're earning, you're saving, which goes into investment. And towards the end of your earning career, then it is the rent, interest, dividend, profit, which fills your money box with investment income. So that's the last few years of your life. And whereas there are other goals, I think the big goal for most people is retirement, and you should take it seriously because of inflation and because of lifestyle. You do need a large corpus. These are some numbers that I have done. And it's a little difficult to think through, but essentially what you're thinking is you have to extrapolate what you'll be spending every year at age 60. And again, these things vary according to your lifestyle. So if you have the ratio, you will know how much you need to do. So it's 18 to 35 times of your annual expense at age 60. 18 times if you plan to eat up your entire corpus, 35 times if you plan to leave it all. Now, Indians typically will leave everything to their kids. So I've taken a middle number, 26, that you eat half the corpus, half you're leaving to your kids. At an annual expense of 20 lakh at age 60, the corpus that you need to retire is 5.2 crore. Okay, because of inflation, because of the way that this is structured. This, I have overstated the need, but yet, even if you look at a number at 5 crore, it is not a small amount. There is another way to look at it, that how are you doing at age 40? You should have about 3 times of your annual income as part of your retirement pot. At age 50, 6 times of your annual income. At age 60, you should have 8 times of your annual income. These are numbers from Fidelity, so there may be some mismatches with the Indian situation, but these are very broad rules of thumb, where at least you know that you're on track. You know, if you are at 2.8 and not 3, it shouldn't cause you too much stress because you're doing fairly well. So don't take it as set in stone. It's more a broad direction that it's going, northwest. And then if you're there in the general direction, you're doing fine. So, but if you find you're going south when the direction is northwest, then you know that you need a course correction. So everything I will say will not have anything set in stone, because every person is different, every family is different, the reason that you need money in the future is different. So use this to construct your own money habit, your own money plan. So we'll just talk about the 6 habits. So anybody who's been on a diet will resonate when I say that crash diets don't work. You starve yourself, you reduce your weight, and then immediately after that, it comes back, sometimes substantially more. So in your physical fitness, a regular workout and good food habits, which is not snacking, which is, all the things that we know, eating nutritious food, eating on time, all of them go to build physical fitness. Crash diets do not work. Similarly with money, we need money habits, stock tips, property tips, any other tips don't work. They may work for some people. This is a matter of luck rather than any planned investment which gives you a return. So a lot of people will straight away go into asset allocation, diversification, derivatives, and talk about how to invest. But I think investing comes at the 6th or the 7th step. We're not even preparing ourselves to start investing, and we are going directly into the deep pool. if we were to first learn to swim in the shallow and then go towards the deep end, we would be far safer, far more able to deal with what comes there. And that is what we are going to do. We first need what I call the cash flow system. If you've read the book, you'd have understood what this is. Essentially, what happens is that a lot of us end up saying is that I don't know where my money goes. I know it comes in, but it disappears. I don't know where it goes. And again, making budgets, everyone advocates it, but it becomes very boring. Again, think of it as a thing that you do month on month on month. You will get bored of putting down all that you're spending on small things. An easier way is to separate out your spending from your savings. It's a very simple intervention, but it actually does work. And I've had lots and lots of people coming back and saying, after 6 months of doing it, I had no idea I could save this much money, because you are just removing from your spending, your saving money. So I create 3 bank accounts and I label them. So the account into which all the inflows fall, whether it's salary, rent, interest, dividend, profit, whatever is coming, bonus, it comes into the income account. And we all know about how much we are spending every month. So if you're getting 1 lakh a month, maybe you're spending 60,000, maybe you're spending 70,000.
Hello.
If you're spending more than that, there is a problem. So can we please mute everyone? So in you're removing from your income account into your spending account the amount that you think you will spend, and the rest right now is which goes to your third account, which I call invested account. So right now we are saying the savings is a residual, because we are trying to work out how much we spend every month. So if you do this for 6 months, you will get a fairly good idea of what you're spending every month. If no money is going into your invested account, that's the third bank account, then you know there is cause to worry. Where the direction is northwest, you're going south. There has to be a savings component of your money box. So we'll come to ratios of how much you should be doing, but this simple intervention gives you a much better hold on how you're spending, what you're spending on, and how much really are you being able to save. It also keeps you out of debt, because you only have that much money to spend. When you've labeled the account invested, behavioral finance tells us, and psychologists tell us, that it's very difficult to violate the title of that bank account. So it could be whatever XYZ bank, but in my mind, that is my invest it account. And my account in ABC Bank is my spending account. So we give things.
Friends, ma'am got disconnected. Just wait for a few seconds. Yeah, she's on. Yes, ma'am. Unmute yourself, ma'am.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want me to begin again, or?
No, you can start the same screen and start again on that.
Okay. Okay, is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so essentially what we're doing is we're separating out our spending from our saving. Second intervention, you have to build an emergency fund. You have to be prepared. And this is, once we have all been through this whole COVID period, we know how important that savings corpus is. Instead of starting to save for retirement, the first thing to do is to build an emergency fund. This is the money which should last you between 6 months to 2 years in case your income stops. Income can stop because of a job loss. It could be because of a medical emergency so that you can't go to work and you're on without pay leave. It could be because you're laid off. At least 6 months of your monthly spends has to be in a liquid, easy to reach place, which doesn't take too much time to redeem, sell, and get the money. So typically you don't want things like a piece of real estate in your emergency fund. You don't need a life insurance policy in your emergency fund. You need products like a bank deposit, a liquid fund, a short duration, or a short-term, ultra short-term debt fund. These are the products that you need so that you can access them when you need the money suddenly, because typically it isn't as if there is no money in the bank. There is some, you'll get by. And if there's a sudden stopping of your income, reasonably in a week or 2 weeks, you should be able to access your emergency fund. Why 2 years of monthly spends? Why so much is that? People in their 50s, if they lose jobs, recovery is extremely difficult. You're in your highest earning years. And if you get laid off in your 50s, it's reasonable to assume that you may not get the same position again. So your retirement corpus should almost be ready by your mid 50s. It's a good idea to have about 2 years of monthly spends in a place that you can reach it easily. So first, we build a cash flow. Second, we build an emergency fund. And I have personally had occasion to use my own emergency fund twice in our lives, me and my husband. And I have to tell you that the presence of that emergency fund prevents you from doing anything drastic to yourself or those around you, because there are, see, every life will have situations. A life without situations is a boring life. That's not why we came here. I mean, we all grow because we are put in very difficult situations, and that's what life is about. The presence of money to pay your EMI, to pay your food bills, to look after your elders, that presence of that money is extremely important so that you can take the right decisions and then move out of that crisis. So I cannot emphasize this pool of money, which you do not touch for anything, not for your children's education, not for anything. You keep that for your emergency. Now, you have to build your spending, saving, and borrowing formulas. And then again, these are thumb rules. It depends your age and stage, very broad rules. 50% of your take home you spend on living. You can save 20%, and 30% of your take home, your EMIs should not be greater than 30% of your take home. This is especially true for the younger generation. You have a lot of temptation coming on mobile saying that instant credit on your mobile, in your bank account, just follow that link. Just stay away from instant credit. You're giving them your entire social media footprint. You're giving them access to your pictures. You're giving them access to a lot of things. Just say no. You don't need that kind of credit. So the first thing to remember is that even when you take good credit, like maybe a home loan, you try and keep it at 30% of your take home. If you find your credit card bills and your personal loans and your other EMIs are reaching 25, 30%, even without a home loan, you really have to rethink what you're borrowing for and where it's going to take you. And like I said, every age and stage will have different ratios that you work with. In your 20s, very limited elbow room to save because your salary is low. You may have taken education loans. And your question would be, do I repay my loan or do I save? You should repay your loan as fast as you can, because that's one loan you don't want on your head, because in your 20s, you're moving towards your 30s when the need for a home loan will arrive. So that is the loan you need to get out of and keep all the other loans very, very little. If you're doing your basic provident fund investments, it's okay not to have that savings ratio that is aspirational. We'll park it for the moment. 30s is again a high cost decade. Most people have settled down. There are expanding families. Home loan possibly has begun. So again, you're trying to save what you can in this decade. Most people in their 40s, now you've had 15 years of working, most people get a huge income bump around this time. That your potential to save actually begins now. So hopefully you've got the money for your kids' higher education in the first few 15 years of earning. Your provident fund is giving you a core for your retirement. you can start thinking about investing more on for your retirement starting in your 40s. 50s is your highest earning years. Your kids have become financially self-sufficient. Your home loan is zero. If it isn't, you need to worry. You should be debt-free by the time you're in your 50s. I know of families who in their 50s are saving 70% of their take home because simply your needs settle down by this age and your kids are grown up. There's not so much to spend on. So a lot of people salt away a large part of their retirement corpus in your 50s, but there's a danger to this strategy, which is that if you get laid off in your 50s, you're a very high cost employee for the organization. And we've seen this in COVID times. Then this strategy will go completely off. So don't leave your entire retirement corpus building to your 50s. You should be following the ratios that I had given earlier. Habit 4, sensible insurances. You should have your own medical insurance for sure, because when you're younger, your company insures you. But as you get towards retirement, you will realize that it's more and more difficult to build your personal health insurance. For an organization like yours, you could definitely look for a group health cover, because health insurance will cover groups who have not come together for the purpose of buying insurance. So obviously you people qualify to buy that group. So do think about maybe you already have medical insurance because it's cheaper, and companies have a better claims experience for groups rather than individuals. So do think about that, because this is an advantage that this group has that many other groups don't have, because they're disparate. So do think about that. Life insurance, it's a very, very missold product. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to say, do not ever bundle your investment and insurance. Life insurance is needed if you have dependents. If you die midway, then the stream of your income will stop. Your family will have goals of just living, education, marriage. Maybe there is EMI to be paid. You need a large sum of money, usually 10 times of your annual income or 15 to 20 times of your annual spend. Again, if you've already done a fair bit of savings, these ratios begin to change. So essentially, you're trying to fund the lives of the people in your family if your income stream is not there. The only product which works is a pure term life insurance cover. The ULIPs, the traditional insurance plans, the money back endowment whole life, you just please stay away from. And I will tell you why: because it's missold, it's a trap. It earns money for the agent, the banks, and the insurance companies. You will lose. And this is the reason why. When they sell an endowment or a term or a money back plan to you, this is not the ULIP. 85% of the 35 trillion rupees is invested in life insurance in India. It's 35 with 12 zeros behind it. That is the kind of retail money which goes into these products. So when they sell that to you, the agent, bank, or the individual agent is legally getting between 35,000 to 42,000 of your first, let's say 1 lakh rupee premium. So it's 35% to 42%. So if your premium is 1 lakh in a year, the agent is getting between 35 to 42,000 legally, and illegally he's getting your entire first premium, which is why he offers to rebate half of that back to you. So you're paying 1 lakh and you're getting 50,000 back. It's the worst deal of your life, and you'll see why. Remember, what is happening is this is his first commission. From year 2, his commission is dropping to 7,500, which is 7,500 rupees. These are typically 15 to 20 year plans. In these incentives, what are we building in? We are building in incentives to sell you one policy and then sell you a fresh one after a few years, because the agent's incentives are to keep selling you a new policy to harvest the first year commission, because he's getting 42,000 rupees on 1 lakh on a fresh insurance policy. The old insurance policy is only giving him 7,500. So his incentive is to sell you more. But what happens if you change your mind? So, okay, fine, you've made a bad investment and you realize insurance rules allow insurance companies to make it cost very, very expensive for you to exit these plans. So you paid the first premium, you paid 1 lakh, And then you came across either my book or you heard me saying, and you said, okay, this is a bad deal. I want to stop this policy. You don't pay the second premium. Legally, you get nothing back. You get zero. Insurance rules allow the insurance companies to keep your entire first premium. So if you're worrying about market volatility, if you're worrying about little money going up and down, this is a full capital loss. Your 1 lakh is gone. And the agent will come and make you feel better and say, no, it's okay. We'll get it back. We'll, you buy this new policy. We'll try and sell you something else, some other crap. Suppose now you change your mind after 2 years. You paid 2 lakh and you don't pay the third premium. You get 60,000 of the 2 lakh back. Rest is all kept by the insurance company. Now, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, now after 3 years, you change your mind. Okay. You get out of 3 lakh premium, you get 1 lakh back. Now most of these policies are sold as 5-year products. I'm sure you've had someone saying, 5 साल का product है, उसके बाद आपको मत देना पैसा. You will buy something new. That's why, because after 5 years, you've paid 5 lakh and you stop funding the policy, you get 2.5 lakh back. It's a capital loss to your money. It's not even that you're making money. And these are the numbers that we did. The blue line is your investment for the life cycle of this insurance policy. And the red line is what you get back if you exit the policy each year that I have said. So if you exit in the 7th year, you've paid 7 lakh, but you're getting 4.5 lakh back. Till almost the end of the policy, you're getting less than what you invested. At the end of the policy, suddenly the line goes up, it cuts the blue line, which means you're beginning to get more than what you had invested. But if you do a average annual return over the life of the policy, it's about 3% return. So finally, even if you hold this, you're not getting very much return. And the worst part is that insurance data is telling us that the persistency rate at the 5th year mark is 44%. What this means simply is that more than half of the policies sold don't survive 5 years. They're selling you 20-year products. More than half don't complete 5 years, which means who is making the money? The insurance agent and the insurance company, because companies are allowed to book profits out of what are called lapsation money or surrendered profits. They're allowed to book profits on the money that they have not given you back. So this is just a bad deal. The only life insurance you need is called term insurance plan. Habit 5, I'm running out of time. You have to give your money an equity exposure. I'm not saying go out and buy direct stocks. I'm not saying do day trading. I'm saying your money deserves Indian equity exposure. This is an exercise I've done myself, where I've taken the Sensex and 1980-81, invested hypothetically, 1 lakh is invested in a fixed deposit, 1 lakh is invested in a public provident fund. Out of 1 lakh, gold is bought. And out of 1 lakh, we bought the Sensex. Sensex is the 30 stocks market index. In the 1980s, there was no way to buy the Sensex. There was nothing called an index fund or an ETF. This is hypothetical. But if you map that money on the Sensex, then we can do this extrapolation and see a return. The 3 lines at the bottom of the screen, the blue, green, and yellow, is where the money would have reached in almost these 40 years in gold, PPF, and fixed deposit. It's a few lakhs, 25 to 42 lakh. It's still a great return. It's a great return till you see the red line, which is the money in the stock market. Would have been 1.7 crore. And I did this number when markets had fallen 30%. Markets are now up 70% from that dip. And that 1.7 crore is, I don't know, maybe it's like a 2.5 or a 3 crore. I have to update this chart. But essentially, markets go up and down. What we need to understand is that look at the way the volatility goes. If you had bought when the market had just crashed, you would feel as if the whole world was over. But if you just held on, in March, a lot of people withdrew their investments from the markets. But then they missed out on an entire climb back of the stock market. really on the stock market is the volatility, which is markets going up and down. But when you see that a 1-day 6% crash, and that's a very brutal crash, happened 19 times in the last 40 years. But it increased 6% in a day 24 times. A 1-day fall of 4% happened 90 times, but it rose 4% 92 times. The worst 1-day fall was 13%. This is the Harshad Mehta scam. 1-day fall 13%. It's brutal. The best 1-day rise was 17%. This is UPA2 when the left government was thrown out. Of course, the market misjudged what UPA2 would do, but so market is short-term sentimental, long-term sensible. And when we see charts like this, we realize what short-term exuberant or depressive and long-term sensible means. So everyone says that you should invest in the market for the long term. And when I'm saying market, I'm thinking of a broad market index, like a Sensex or a Nifty. This is a technical chart. I don't want to go into this. All that you need to understand is that if we look at the first red and blue dots to the left of the screen, now this is data which is showing that in the last 40 years, there was 1 year in the stock market when you gained your 336%, 3 times money you made. A lakh became 3 lakh in a year. But there was 1 year in these 40 years when you lost half your money. 1 year holding period. If you increased your holding period to 2 years, you look at the second blue and red dot. Something is beginning to happen. Your maximum gain is reducing. There was 1 2-year period in which you got 160% return, but there was 1 2-year period in which you lost 32% of your money. Now you hold for 3 years. You're realizing that your that maximum gain is going down, but the maximum loss is also going down. And again, this data was done when the market was at its worst. So between 7 to 10 years is the period in which there is no downside to the equity market in terms of an index in an Indian context, which means that there's no 7 to 10 year period in which you have lost money. So all that this means is that if you hold long term is between 7 to 10 years, in a broad market index, you will do well because your average return in that time has been about 15%. There have been 10-year periods in which you would have done really badly. But as we saw in the previous chart, that it takes 6 months for the markets to recover the deep losses that it has made. It's recovered 70% from the March lows. And we've seen that over and over again. And why does that happen? Because the index, look at this. This is the index represented by the shares of different industries in the 30. Can we all mute ourselves, please? Please, everyone mute yourself. I lose the thread of what I'm saying. So this is the composition of the Sensex in terms of the share of the industries represented by the stocks listed in the market. So I'm making a case for index investing for people who don't understand markets. Look at the 1980s to 90s. Please mute yourself. Can the moderator just mute everybody?
Yeah, muted, ma'am.
Yeah, thanks. So look at the way that industries also have changed. Consumer discretionary was a huge chunk of the Sensex. It's reduced. Look at materials. We used to be a commodity country because, before liberalization. Look at the materials share has become so little. Look at when information technology is born and look at its increasing share. Look at financial sector getting born. 91 was liberalization. 93, I think the first private sector mutual fund came in. Insurance companies came in. Private sector banks were set up, were allowed to set up in 1993, 96, I think. You see the whole financial journey beginning represented on the stock market. So all that I'm saying here is that if you don't understand markets, and direct stocks are very risky, day trading is a bad idea, that's fun, not investment. As a starting point, what you need to do is give your money equity exposure, which means you're investing in a broad market index, Sensex or Nifty. You're looking for a mature way to increase your money long term rather than an overnight richness of seeing your stock double. So index investing is a low cost way to always hold the top stocks of a country. And as we grow, as we understand this, we will understand how to take this thought forward. Mutual funds in India are extremely safe in terms of there's no risk of fraud. Nobody will run away with your money. Mutual funds are formed on a trust structure, which means the money is owned by the trust. The asset manager, the mutual fund, cannot run away with your money. So the mutual fund rules were framed in the aftermath of the Harshad Mehta scam. And policymakers then have hard-coded safety against fraud, not safety against market volatility or bad fund management. Those are separate risks. But against fraud, against people collecting your money and then running away with it, that risk is not there. It's not there in insurance companies also. So in terms of fraud, there is no fraud. There is mis-selling. That's a separate story altogether. So you need your money to have equity exposure, and you need a balanced diet. A lot of times I'm asked the question, small caps are doing well, shall I buy? Or gilt funds are doing well, shall I buy? I mean, I say, I don't know how to answer that question. It's like saying, I only want to eat paneer, or I only want to eat palak. You don't do that. You don't buy last year's winner. What you need is a balanced diet. So the Indian thali is like the epitome in my head of what balance looks like. There's everything on it. Quantities are small, and you are getting your mix of proteins, carbohydrates, minerals, greens. The taste kicker is the achar, the papad, there's salad, there's everything on it. We need to think of balance in our investing. So to ask me, is it a good time to enter equities, is just something I can't deal with, because every time is a good time to be in equities. It's your asset allocation. So if you're starting from a very basic premise that my basic asset allocation is between equity and debt. Remember, we said debt is fixed income, PPF, fixed deposit bonds, debt funds. And equity is, in this case, I'm going to only stay with index fund investing, not direct stocks, unless you are a fund manager and you can understand those things. Let's stay very, very simple. A rule of thumb is 100 minus age for equity and your age for debt. Again, these are rules which are subject to change. But remember, even at age 70, you have 30% equity in your portfolio. Once you've understood this, then you go to level 2 allocation, which is within equity, your allocation is between large, mid, and small cap. Again, the indexes are there. You can choose the index. The problem with choosing fund managers and managed schemes is that you have fund manager risk. So either you have a very good financial planner who's able to take you through a portfolio construction like this, where you've articulated your goals and you've got products to suit that particular articulation. Otherwise, just doing it yourself with index funds is not a bad idea. In your debt portfolio, you have a mix of liquid, short-term, low duration products, along with your fixed deposits, your PPF, government bonds, if you have any. Your PF is also part of your debt allocation. Gold, you should either look at the government bonds or ETF. Jewelry is not an investment. They're nice things to wear, but that's not an investment. How many times have you seen anyone actually go sell their jewelry? It doesn't really happen. So buy the government bond if your holding period is at least 7 years. But for liquidity, ETFs could be better. About 5 to 10% of gold. And then you're maturing in your portfolio, you're understanding market. Your corpus is large enough. You need geographical diversification, which means funds which invest in the US market, in the Eastern market, in the rest of the world, 15 to 20% of your portfolio through the Indian mutual funds, you can buy funds abroad. You don't have to do any currency conversion. You just buy the Indian fund, it's a fund of funds, and they invest the money abroad. So you introduce geographical diversification into your portfolio. So at every stage, you have all the nutrition elements in your money box. You're not moving from debt to equity to Bitcoin to real estate, but at every point you have this. So you modify them as you go along. But I know a lot of you are thinking, what about real estate? I find it a very clunky, difficult asset. There's a first order problem for me of generating the black money or turning white into black for real estate deals. And once you onboard that black money component in your real estate, every time you get in or get out, you have to deal with that component. It's a bad thing to start. It's difficult, and India is changing the way it looks at cash. It's changing the way it looks at non-formal sectors. You should expect these moves of the government to continue and harden. So the cost of black money, of non-tax paid money, is going up, and it'll progressively go up more and more. So it's best to treat real estate as any other asset. We tend to think of real estate point to point. We don't include all the costs. If you include all the costs and you do point to point, today, as we are in 2020, over a 10-year period, real estate has lost you money in all the metros. If you index your buying price, if you put in the property taxes, the upgrades you've made, the maintenance costs, you have lost money over a 10-year period, at least. If you're thinking of renting and buying, unless you're going to be living in the city, renting today is better because the EMI costs you 7 to 10 times more than rent. Only if you want to live in the city for a long term, then you can think of buying. A simple rule of thumb, you have to look at the yield of the property. When you're thinking of investment, treat real estate as any other investment. Yield is your annual rent that you will get divided by the value of the property. In most Indian metros, this number is 1.5 to 2. At 3%, it begins to get interesting, not before that. You start looking for a good deal at when you know market is maybe beginning to turn. You start looking, and if you get a good deal between 3 to 4%, you start getting interested, and then it begins to make sense. Although the ratios say that before 5%, it will take you a very, very, very long time to recover your money. Because again, remember, a lot of the buoyancy of real estate market was because of the cash. The political corruption was finding its way. Where will the money go? It can go abroad through Hawala. You can buy gold or real estate. All of those loopholes are slowly being closed. So do not expect the same kind of returns that we have seen over the last few decades. So these are the big 6 habits of financial fitness. A cash flow system, emergency fund, your own spending, saving, borrowing ratios. Insurances, I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not get caught in bundled insurance plans. It's a complete drain of your money. You have to give your money equity exposure, and you need all the products all the time in the ratios which suit your particular financial health. I have some slides. I'll leave it with the organizers. These are just sheets that you can fill to help you think through some of the things that I have said. It's like a worksheet. You'll be able to put your own ratios there. That's all that I have. Happy to answer questions.
It was a great thing, actually. What we have learned, a lot of things, how to manage your portfolio, a lot of things, and most of the people must be having query. And we have one, Mr. Hiteshji Gadia having a query. Hiteshji Gadia, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. As well as if you can switch on the screen, it will be great. Hiteshji? Meanwhile, Hiteshji comes, we have Vikasji Dhariwal.
Yeah.
Oh, just a moment. I'll just change the settings.
Yeah, hello, Ms. Monica. Hitesh here. Good afternoon. So I just had one question. I personally follow the money jar system by MMI by Habika. That is the Millionaire Mind Intensive. So I always have a question with that one jar of play. In India, we don't reward ourselves enough, right? Whereas if you go to the US and Europe, 10% of it is spent in rewarding yourself. And I'm not talking about the daily expense habits. Since you said money formation is a habit, I mean, won't rewarding ourselves get us to follow this even better? I mean, it will motivate us enough. So, I mean, at least in India, we don't see people speaking about, spending on yourself, that 5-10% of what you do, just on yourself.
Right. No, it's an important point. As I said, the system that I'm giving is very broad. So in that 50% spending, so I've given 50% for spending on yourself. You can have sub ratios to say, of this, I will keep 5 to 10% for spending on my own, or I will not borrow up to that limit of 30. Let me keep 10% of that for rewarding for myself. So if I'm keeping my borrowing under the lid, I have that elbow room for increasing savings and rewarding myself. So use the system that I'm giving you very dynamically. So work with it to say that, oh, my borrowing ratios actually are very little. So here is this, nice 20% chunk left. What do I want to do with it? Oh, 10% I will reward myself and 10% I will just bump up my savings. So use this dynamically to address your own situations.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, ma'am. Vikas here. Thanks for the insightful session. I just wanted your views on the PMS schemes, the portfolio management schemes.
Right. So PMS, the way that the regulator has thought of the market is that mutual funds are for the pure retail investors. Then you have PMS for people who understand markets and are able to decode the products better. And then there's the alternate investment for the sophisticated investors. The only problem I have with PMS schemes is that there are no broad benchmarks on how to evaluate. Every PMS will come with its own benchmark.
Mhm.
And every PMS will come with its own cost structure. So whereas it can be more lucrative than a average mutual fund and index approach, you need to have the wherewithal to understand the product. If you don't understand what they're saying, what they're selling, then maybe it's not a portfolio for you. So my only sense of discomfort with PMS schemes is that I have to trust the person launching the scheme so that he's not building in benchmarks which are contaminated. You understand that with a retail product, it's like riding in the metro. The metro will come, it'll go where it's supposed to go. But with the Uber driver, there is a little bit of trust in his ability to drive, his intentions of not robbing the passenger, and at the moment, not having COVID, for instance. So just these differences in the experience of riding a broad public transport versus your own bespoke taxi. So if you are able to understand the product, and you have built up trust with the PMS manager, I see no harm. But as a general advice to people who don't understand markets, I'm saying stay away.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
We have Chetanji Ostwal. So please unmute yourself and the video screen so you can ask question. Chetanji?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello. The question is related to LIC, and there are a few LIC policies which I've taken for me, wife, and kids, and they all give 6% return if I calculate annual returns for that over 21 years. I want to know what should I do now? Should I exit out of it? And what is the return of money from the LIC company? It'll be like, I don't know, I haven't checked, but it might be less than what I've paid them. What should I do?
So again, specific policies depends when you took the policy, what the interest rates were then. So with certain policies which were sold when the interest rate cycle was very high. So if the interest rate cycle is at 8 or 10%, LIC or whichever company sold a 6% guaranteed return policy, that's fine. And if you are getting a 6% post-tax return, it's not a bad thing. So I'm saying evaluate what you have. All the policies being launched now will have a return of between 2.5% to 4% because the bond rates have gone down. So do evaluate your own policy to see, is it actually giving you a 6% post-tax return? And is that what you want to have in your very safe portfolio? If not, then you have to be ready to take a hit on the premiums that you have paid, because as I said, you will get very little back. Also, for children's policies, it's far better to put the money for the future of the education in, say, an index fund, so that the money will grow far better, because you don't want to insure the life of the child. There is no insurable interest. It is the life of the principal breadwinner which has to be insured. So they are sold as education plans, as periodic money back plans. But like you say, when you do the numbers, the return is very little. So I would just encourage you to look at, really, is with a 6% return, are you okay? It's a post-tax return, so that's not bad at all. Are you okay with letting that be the core part of your safe investments and then starting to build your equity investments?
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, one of the member has a question that at what age should we start teaching the kids about the money management?
You know what? You don't teach. They don't do what you say. They do what you do. So just observing you dealing with money, if you are very obviously giving into temptation to buy the next gadget before the old one is done, that is what they're taking away. If you have different rules for them and for yourself where money is concerned, they will notice that. So the best thing to do is to practice what you want them to do. They will just simply learn, observe and learn. And there's no harm in saying that we are not going for that holiday right now because I need money to invest for this. We want to buy a car after 2 years. I don't want to take a loan. So we will not go for the annual holiday this year because, so there's no shame in admitting that as the provider of the family, there isn't enough this year. So I think sometimes, especially the male ego gets a little defensive when it comes to the ability to provide. But showing that vulnerability to say, well, this year has not been a good year, the company bonus didn't come, and we will have to forego because, well, this year was different. So it also builds in this image of you not being a god, and then coming to teenage and saying, oh, well, actually, they are not gods. So the whole rebellion piece comes in there. And to saying that, yeah, well, this year has not been a good year. And so essentially what I'm saying is do what you want them to do. Don't tell them, and involve them in some major decisions just when you're discussing about it.
Great, ma'am. One question from our President, Lakshmipatji, sir.
Monica, ma'am, as usual, it was insightful session, and always just one question, which not question basically, I just want to have your view. What I've understood over a period of many years that wealth creation is function of time. How much intelligent we are, but it's a function of time if you want to create a long-term wealth. And two virtues which I think people have it and people need to imbibe is, one is obviously a discipline and patience. What is your view on that? I mean, people can think of LIC, people can think of these tips and everything. Ultimately, if I want to create a wealth for, let's say, the next 10, 20 years, if I don't have a patience and a discipline, I think all of this goes in a toss, even though however smart you are, however trading you can do. So what's your view to all of us who are trying to, are they in the, either they're in the journey of wealth creation or they want to start now?
You've got the answer. It is discipline. It is just pure discipline, which actually gets you financially fit. And if you just unpack this discipline, how do you build the discipline? You need a system. And all that I have said till now is trying to give that system to you. And how to discipline yourself? You separate your savings and your spending. How do you build discipline? That you already decide that my asset allocation is going to be like this. So it's not a fresh decision every time that markets go up or down.
Yep.
You already then choose the products that you're going to be investing in, so that again, it's not a fresh decision every time there is new money. That you have a structure in place and your money goes into that automatically. So what you need to build for your money is a system which runs on its own. You just open the box twice in a year to see if everything is well. If there is some kachra which has, you throw that out. Maybe there's some fund which has malfunctioned. Maybe your own needs have changed. Maybe your life situation has changed. So you rejig it. But money is not something you think about every day. It's actually an enabler which allows you to live your life, whether it's spending time with family, working very hard, reading a book, listening to music, going for a walk. You shouldn't be looking at the stock market and wasting your time.
Yep.
Let that be the work of fund managers. Money is just the enabler which allows you to live your life. So if you shift the focus like that, and then you have a system in place, then the system works on its own. And after a few years, you'll know the signs when it's not working. But essentially, we have to have the money. The money doesn't have to have us.
One more thing which you have covered in your book, but I think you did not cover today, about what is the right time or what is the appropriate time to create will? Do we have to get older, 60, 70, and then we do create will?
No. I mean, as soon as you have dependence, as soon as you start having dependence, I think it's a great idea to create your will. It's just a document which is required in case there's a death, and death can happen anytime. It's not going to wait till your 80s. I think the entire Indian spiritual tradition is about understanding that it can end instantly, and how prepared are you to go at every moment. So having a will is actually something that you owe to the rest of your family, because without a will, the kind of runaround that they will have is terrible. So as soon as you have a family, you need to create your will. And remember, you can keep updating the will. There's no problem with that.
Thanks, ma'am.
Ma'am, we have running of the short of time, but still we will take one question from Nikhil Bhatia, and one question in the screen, ma'am, already. It is ma'am, a chunk of us in our community don't retire. Basically, being into Jain community and Marwadi community, most of the members or most of the people don't retire early. They still work till 70s, 60s, whatever the age they have. So hence, what is the advice do you give in for that section?
No, it's great. I mean, retirement is a very, I think, foreign concept in India. But yet, because people in the organized sector do retire at a certain age, there are these ratios for that. Look, if you are comfortable that you will generate income as you are aging, then you can work with the ratios a little bit, the ones that I have given. You can reduce the ratio that you require for your retirement. The only caveat is that you should be prepared. There should be enough so that if something happens which prevents you from going to work. So one is the willingness to work. Some people don't want to after a while, they want to travel and all that. That's a separate thing. But I think most of us are willing to work. We don't look at our lives as not being able to work. I mean, that is death, not being able to work. But there can be situations in which your health doesn't allow you to work, or you're not able to work to your full capacity. I would suggest to build cushions for that scenario where the willingness is there, but the body's ability is not there. So tweak the ratios a bit. You can reduce your retirement corpus, because this is at age 60. You can, if the minute you increase it to age 70 retiring, the ratios go down drastically.
Great, ma'am. One more question. Nikhil Bhatia can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, hi Monica ma'am. I've just started my career as a software engineer, and currently I don't have any borrowing monthly installments. So that 30% of my income, what do you suggest I do with that? Because currently I don't have any EMI.
Okay. So, so one way to think about this is that if you do plan to have an EMI, which means you plan to buy a house, this 30% could go towards contributing to the down payment of that house. So now you have the luxury of having this chunk of money, and you can split it between, if you feel very strongly that you need to reward yourself, you could use a part for that. You could just bump up your long-term savings or your medium-term savings with a part of that. Or you could say that I have this big expense coming up. It's a targeted expense, a car or a home or your own marriage. And this 30%, I'm going to target towards that. So one thing is to split it up into smaller pieces. We tend to think of the number as a whole number, but you can split it up and target a very specific goal with this amount.
Okay, thank you.
Great, guys. It was a great session and a lot of queries been answered. Still, you can connect ma'am on the social media platform. Any other queries, you can just put it across there. Participants request you to stay back till the end. So we have a few important announcements to be made. Before that, a great session by Monica ma'am. She has been always so humble, and the way she spoke and the things were so clear for everyone to understand the whole portfolio management in a better way. Let it be a 5.2 crore at the retirement. A big amount looks like now, but still you need to plan, guys. So almost most of them have already started planning their financial plans as of now, and having some questions and queries and ideas to how to make yourself more better in the coming years. Looking at your age groups, whichever age group you are, start planning your financial plannings as early as possible so that you become the best one at the moment of your retirement. Moving to the further view, I would like to our Vice President, Tirapan Professional Forum, Bangalore branch, Rahul Kumarji, to just give us and propose the vote of thanks.
जय जिनेंद्र एवरीवन. अनंत आस्था के केंद्र परम पूज्य आचार्य श्री महाश्रमण जी के चरणों में वंदन.
Rahul ji, we are not able to hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible?
No, we are not able to hear you.
Yes, Rahul ji, we can hear you.
Okay. Let me begin again. अनंत आस्था के केंद्र परम पूज्य आचार्य श्री महाश्रमण जी के चरणों में वंदन. Can everyone else hear me?
Rahul ji, yes, we are able to hear you.
We can hear you, Rahul. We can hear you, Rahul.
Okay. TPF के आध्यात्मिक पर्यवेक्षक मुनिश्री रजनीश कुमार जी के चरणों में वंदन. Benjamin Franklin said an investment in knowledge. I think Hitesh ji, the problem seems to be at your end. The rest are able to hear me.
Yeah, we are able to hear clearly, Rahul ji. You can continue.
Okay. Benjamin Franklin once said an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And I think we've spent the last 1.5 hours investing in knowledge, and I really hope that all of us have some takeaways. Monica ji talked about Dhan Chakra or Money Map and the 6 habits for personal finance management. And as Hitesh ji mentioned, I think all of us in our heads would have started planning out. I'm really hopeful we have done. A lot of thumb rules that we can take away and apply. So first up, I would like to thank Monica ji for this very insightful and practical session that we all had great takeaways from. I would also like to extend a big thank you to all the national team members, National President Sri Naveen ji Parekh, National General Secretary Sri Himmat ji Mandot, the past presidents Sri Nirmal ji Kotecha, Sri Sanjay ji Dhariwal, national team members Nirmal ji Sancheti, and zonal team members Dinesh ji Doka, CL Nahar ji. Thank you for attending. Would also like to extend great thank you to the platform. I think in the absence of the platform, it would have been impossible for us to host this great and very insightful session. and all the participants who made it possible from different parts of India on a Sunday morning. Thanks a lot for attending the event. TPF strives for making sure that we have great events happening, and we have a bunch of events planned and lined up. We really hope and expect all of you to join us on future sessions as well. I would also like to extend a big thank you to the team, Lakshmipad ji, our president, TPF Bangalore president, Hitesh ji Gidia and his team, to making this event happen and making it happen so smoothly. So big thank you and big Om Maharam to the entire team, and we look forward to more such sessions. Thank you.
Great insightful session today we had. Just to give few insights about the upcoming program. Friends, do we understand that we have our own kids been graduating at a great level? 10th standard with 85%, a graduation at 12th standard at 85%, or the degree or any professional degree been taken at a great 85%. You have your own kids been working hard and climbing the ladder, climbing the education ladder in a bigger way. So we at the Terapan Professional Forum gives you an opportunity to be part of this Medhavi Saman Samaro, where we'll be felicitating all the students of above 85%. So if you have not registered, please contact us immediately. You can contact me on my contact number is 9886704260, or we'll be floating the messages in the groups of TPF Bangalore branch as well as other groups, so that you can register immediately and be part of this. The event is happening at Terapan Bhavan, Gandhinagar at Bangalore on 20th of December. So further details, all you can just get it on the flyers, what you'll be getting in the groups. So over to the day was superb, as was started in a Sunday, and in the most important is the pandemic is just about to close. We are beginning the vaccinations. So guys, you can plan your next upcoming year 2021, the next decade, as well as in the future coming years. You can make yourself financially strong. Before that, we close for the day. Have a great time, guys. This session was great, insightful. Thanks, Monica ma'am, for giving such a great moment for us to hold the session, and it was very insightful. Thank you very much for all the members who are part of this. Have a great time, guys. Have a great weekend and have a beautiful Sunday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.